Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us tonight on episode 31, season 2 of the StandOff with Brad and Richie here on New Zealand Sport Radio. We're here live every Wednesday night on Facebook throughout the season. Good evening, Richie. Thank you for joining me again tonight. We're down to 2 teams in the NRL competition. Surprising games in the weekend for me. Spoilers early, I got both of my picks wrong. What did you think of the matches?
Evening, Brad. I thought the matches were great. Pretty dominant performance by the Rabbitohs, I think it has to be said. And finals match for the ages, a titanic struggle. And the other match, Storm versus Panthers. So I really enjoyed it. Love this time of year.
Yeah, definitely. And while we're here live on Wednesdays at 8 p.m, you can also catch our show at your convenience on iHeartRadio. Just remember to search for New Zealand Sport Radio. As always, we're going to cover everything you need to know in the week that was rugby league, including our top stories of the week, a review of the finals games, and our picks. Then we'll answer some questions from all of you, as well as some questions from us. We'll then take a look at the fantasy teams we discussed last week that kind of took over the show for a bit. And then we'll preview the grand final and make our picks before ending the night on some Super League recap. So remember to send us comments and questions throughout the show, and we may as well just get into this top stories of the week, Richie.
Sure, let's do it, buddy.
And yeah, we may as well start with the comment Simon said. Thanks for joining us, Simon. The New Zealand Domestic Rugby League competition starting this weekend, and there's no Auckland teams in it, obviously due to the current situation with that giant wall we've got around Auckland right now. Yeah, a bit disappointing considering it might be a bit controversial, but I feel like the majority of the talent kind of come out of this little city of mine. There are some very good teams elsewhere, but it's generally counties and Auckland that dominate the tournament. So what are your thoughts before we move on about...
Well, hang on a second. This little city of yours, you own Auckland. Oh, wow, I didn't know. You got to sponsor the show.
I paid it off last week. Final payment went through on the mortgage.
What are you saying? You saying I need to lace up for Wellington?
Yeah, I'm sure that will help. That will help Wellington. Yeah. So, do you have any thoughts on that, or?
No, I mean, kind of cool, but obviously a shame for the Auckland-based teams, kind of like the rugby union with the NPC at the moment. But should be good. I'll keep an eye out for what the goings on in that competition.
Yeah, definitely. And so our first story that I had was the Jamal Fogarty news. It was breaking news when we talked about it last week, and I said I'd keep my ear to the ground and get more news. Unfortunately, there hasn't really been a lot more. The Titans have denied his release. And there have now been talks that the Raiders might be looking at offering Josh Hodgson to the Titans in a swap. Would you take that deal? I think it's fair to say the Titans are lacking a hooker. But then if they let Fogarty go, they're also lacking a half.
I mean, for the Raiders, they've got another good hooker in Starling there. So... And the Titans have young Sexton coming through, and I think that he's the one they're really pinning their hopes on. Hence the Jamal Fogarty sort of looking elsewhere. It's kind of a funny one because they only re-signed Fogarty again a couple of months ago. But I believe the Titans' powers have come out and said that Sexton's the one they're sort of looking for going forward. So maybe they just wanted Fogarty as a backup half. I'm not too sure.
Possibly. And I guess they've also got Paul Turner that they got off the Warriors that can slot into the halves as well. So we'll continue to keep our ears to the ground on it, but we'll keep this Raiders train rolling because at the same time, they were also pretty keen to get a release from the Warriors for Chanel Harris-Tavita, which the Warriors have also denied. So it feels like Simon might be able to give us a bit more, being a Raiders fan, but it feels like they're kind of in panic mode after George Williams left them in the lurch, just trying to get anyone they can. The Warriors have continually said that they want to have Chanel long-term at the club. They're just letting him test the market. And in there, I'm putting words in their mouth, but I think it's to get a better deal out of him instead of paying overs. If he goes out and tests the market and sees that he's potentially not worth what he thinks he is, they might save some coin in the back end, or they might end up paying more. But I still don't see him going. And I think the lure of playing with Sean Johnson is going to be too much for him to want to walk out on. But yeah, it's interesting to see. It's interesting to see if the Raiders can snare one of these halves running around. And yeah, we'll touch on Simon's comment in a little bit in the Naughty Boy corner.
That's a quality comment.
Another bit of news. So I've actually got one more bit before we get in the Naughty Boy corner. But Billy Slater has been named the Queensland coach. I believe it's for 2 years at the moment. And there's rumours swirling that he could have the assistance of Jonathan Thurston and Cameron Smith to help him out, as well as an overseeing eye from Wayne Bennett. As a beloved Queensland fan, Richie, what are your thoughts on this news?
Don't you dare call me that, Brad. I'll give you my thoughts, but don't go down that street, mate. Yes, but it could be a good decision by Queensland. I mean, it's not like coaching State of Origin is a little bit different than coaching an NRL season. So the fact that Billy doesn't have big, long history of coaching credentials. Look at what Mel Meninga did for Queensland. You know, I think in Origin, the key really is to obviously be passionate about State of Origin in your state, but also be good at motivating and getting the boys up and primed for emotionally and physically for that battle. So
yeah,
rather than being a master tactician, which I'm sure Billy Slater is anyway, coming from the system he was in and being part of the big three, big four for years and years and years, winning 8 Origins on the trot, could be a good thing. What do you think? You're the real Queensland fan.
Yeah, there's not really a lot of talent in terms of experienced coaching talent out there to take up the mantle. So I don't see any issues with him having a go. And I'm pretty sure he's going to have Wayne Bennett helping in some capacity, because we know Wayne Bennett doesn't have a job next year. And I have a feeling that by the time league season starts, he's going to start getting itchy feet. He just seems like that kind of guy that's going to be coaching until his dying days. He just seems like that type of guy. So I feel like he's going to have some input to help guide Billy along. And it's what's it hurt having him there? If it doesn't go well, that it was worth the shot. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
If Bennett starts getting itchy feet, there's a little old team going to be based in Redcliffe next year. Yeah. I know him and Nathan Brown don't see eye to eye, but maybe we can punt Nathan Brown.
I think that would be the biggest issue with that there, the fact that the two men don't get along. But yes, Naughty Boy Corner, it's becoming quite a common segment in our news stories. But we'll start with Reece Walsh. As Simon commented, he asked if the Warriors could pay Reece Walsh in cocaine instead of money, as it might help the salary cap. He was arrested over the weekend and found in possession of cocaine. He fronted the media the next day with Cameron George, and the Warriors have they're cooperating with the NRL in investigations, and they're working on getting Walsh into some counselling. Before we move on to the next lot, what are your thoughts on first the news and how the club have reacted?
Yeah, look, I'm surprised, but I'm also not surprised. I'm not surprised because, it's the end of the NRL season and teams are now sort of having parties now that their seasons are done, and these kind of things happen in the game of league. We know that. I'm a bit surprised it's Reece Walsh, such a young man. He's got a young baby, and I didn't think that would be Reece Walsh, but he's a young man with a lot of extra money in his pocket this year, so He's probably out celebrating all his hard work he's done this year and a good season he's had. So, but I think the club and Reece have done the right thing by being on the front foot with their media release and press conference. They said all the right things. They're doing the right things, looking at getting him some help. So hopefully he just takes it as something to learn from, and he bounces back strong.
Yeah, and pun intended, he needs to keep his nose clean next year.
Yeah, definitely, pun intended.
Yeah, I was quite shocked about it. As you said, we'll get into it in a little bit because Peter V'landys made some comments that I don't agree with. But I will say my opinion on it now. The NRL has always had a dirty, dark secret about this particular drug for years, and it always seems to happen and always seems to just get swept under the rug. Look at last year after the grand final, we had Brent Naden from the Panthers in the same amount of trouble. It's quite apparent that it's in the game a lot, and the NRL need to come out and do something. I don't know what, but they need to hit it head on instead of covering their ears and saying there's no problems, which is something Peter V'landys is already unfortunately done. But we'll comment on that after the next bit, which was Melbourne Storm. Fresh off their loss, they had some videos leak of Brandon Smith and Cameron Munster with the same product Reece Walsh had. And unlike the Warriors, Melbourne haven't really fronted the media yet. They kind of just said, we're going to let this play out however it plays out. And they're doing everything behind doors, which we mentioned before the show started, Richie, that this approach has had a negative reaction in the media compared to the positive reaction the Warriors have had for front-footing it and admitting and getting, at least make it, even if they aren't actually doing anything, they're making it look like they are, getting on the front foot and fixing the problem as opposed to just, again, sweeping it out on the rug. What are your thoughts? Unfortunately, when I heard the rumor, the two players I thought it would be ended up being the two that it was. Mm-hmm. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so just on that, I'm completely not surprised by this one and by those two. When you look back on last year after Melbourne won the grand final, it was these two that were on a 4 or 5 day bender, I believe. Only I think this time around they've been caught. Not smart, and I think they've got to look hard at the company they're keeping, because they were in a little room with just a few people, and obviously someone snapped the videos and somehow it's become leaked, whether they put it on a social media somehow and then it's spread like wildfire. So
we have
I'm not excused.
We've got a lot of news stories for our whole season too on how rugby league players aren't generally the smartest.
Yeah, exactly. But, I'm not condoning the actions of them, but they've also, like you said, it's something that's obviously quite prevalent throughout the NRL when these guys knock off the end of the season, maybe even during season. But yeah, it's the ones that keep getting filmed and it's spreading out there. They're not very smart about it, on top of the action itself not being so smart.
Yeah.
Do you think that the difference in the way the two clubs have approached it is perhaps also to do with the characters involved, in the fact that you say Reece Walsh has a clean image? This is first time that that's been besmirched, so you can front foot it and people won't go, yeah, again. Whereas with the two with Melbourne, you're kind of like, oh, we promise we'll never do this again. They're like, really? Because we've seen you do it before. Kind of thing.
That could potentially be it. And I think the Warriors have always tried to portray a very clean-cut image.
Yeah.
So I think if there is a drama, they kind of want to get out on the front foot and do it. What happens in terms of punishments that these three will get, I am not sure. There's talks that they haven't really mentioned a lot about Reece Walsh, but it sounds like there could be some lengthy bans in place for Smith and Munster. But it will be a situation where I feel like you got to kind of put them all in the same bucket.
Well, I mean, obviously, repeat offenders should get more, obviously. But I think the Reece Walsh one, from what I read, was the club were going to wait until the legal piece was done before they did their own internal sort of bans. And that, the police thing comes first, and then we'll react after that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, and before we move on from it, Peter V'landys was asked to comment about these situations, and he said that he doesn't believe the NRL has a drug problem, which immediately, that's why I said it was the opposite of mine, because I think they do. We've always heard stories, and there's always seems to be at least one or two a year. Generally at the end of the year when everyone's kind of letting their hair down as such. So I don't think it's the right approach. Even if it is just one or two spoiling it for everyone, you need to address it, because even taking well-being of players off the table, it's a business that Peter V'landys is in charge of, and he wants to make sure it makes money. And drug scandals will not help you in that. So, I think they need to take a serious look at it in the off season, even if he doesn't want to come out in the media straight away and say, we're going to do a crackdown. I know there were talks that the NRL were looking at other ways of doing testing, like hair follicle testing and that, which will pick up drugs like this longer than the typical urine test, because from what I understand with my extreme drug knowledge, quotes in the air, is that the cocaine leaves your system quite quickly, but it stays in your hair follicles for longer, apparently. Paul will know. Paul, you know all this stuff.
Well, I was just wondering how quickly the skinhead will become the new look for NRL players. Right? You laugh, but it was funny how very soon after they did hair follicle testing that certain Man United players became shaved. That's if they do bring it in, you'll find, I think that'll be the response of some players, which gives you a kind of gives you an indication as to who might be a naughty boy.
Yeah, exactly. We'll leave it there on that stuff. I'm sure there's going to be much more news as the week unfolds, so we'll probably have a rehash of it next week. But
Richie will now be spending the next week basically saving photos of every single NRL player so we can compare them to their haircuts for next season.
Either way, it's gonna be better than some of the mullets floating around at the moment.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Not that I can talk. I have to wear a beanie at all times to cover the COVID here. But before we move, we had the second night of the Dally Ends, but before we move on that, we just had some other Warriors news I had. Two, really. Ash Taylor, there's still been no 100% news, but it sounds pretty close to him basically signing a train and trial deal for low figures. I was hoping that there would be a definitive answer before we went live today, because there was news that he was going to make an announcement today, but there's been no announcement as of yet. So we'll definitely have something concrete, I'm sure, by next Wednesday. And on that note as well, the Warriors are also looking to offload Kane Evans. What are your thoughts on that? I know you're on the leader of the Ben Murdoch-Masila fan group, but you're a big Kane Evans supporter, Richie. So what are your thoughts on them potentially letting your favorite Warrior go?
Stop stitching me up, mate. I can't wait to see the back of Kane Evans. That was very good news in my books. Just depends if somebody wants to take him.
From what I've heard, he seems quite open to the idea of leaving and getting a fresh start somewhere, which is kind of funny since this was meant to be his fresh start. And I'm pretty sure you could say it won't be an NRL club; it will be a Super League club. And I'm sure he might do it. He'll probably do all right in the Super League, to be honest. It's just finding a team that's willing to grab him.
Yeah, he'll probably do all right. Maybe not at fighting, but as long as he sticks to playing league, he'll do all right. On Ash Taylor, we were kind of discussing before coming on air, but I think somewhere in the ballpark of 250,000 for a 1-year contract. I think that's smart recruitment. I'm pretty happy with that. Flame me in the comments. I don't care. I think it's good. What about you?
I'm still happy with it as long as the price is right. If they were paying anything like they're paying Cody Nikorima, I wouldn't be happy. I personally think he'll probably do a better job than Cody Nikorima for probably probably more than half the money. So, I don't see it as a bad idea, especially I'm still concerned about the depth in the halves with the likes of Chanel and Sean Johnson struggling to play a full season in the past couple of years. So I've got no problems with it. We just need to wait until they officially announce it.
Yeah.
So before we move on to the shows, we had the last night of the Dally M's on Monday. Tommy Turbo, he won the Dally M medal, which wasn't much of a surprise for me. I kind of had him pegged to win it. He also broke the record for the least amount of games played by a winner, playing only 15 games. He also had the second highest tally in the history of 35 points, which was only beaten by Jonathan Thurston's 36 in 2007. I think it was a great way to cap off his year. Obviously, he would have liked to have been in the grand final this weekend, but that didn't happen. But I think he's still out and out, I think, the best player in the game right now. I know a lot of people were talking about Nathan Cleary for that, but if I had to pick between the two to be in my team, I would pick a healthy Tommy Turbo any day of the week.
Yeah, I think Nathan Cleary must have gone very close. I mean, when you take Tommy Turbo out of the equation, Nathan Cleary had a fantastic season personally as well, and he was unlucky to win it last year as well, and he's just getting better and better. It's just Tommy had such a freakish season. It would have been strange to see anyone but him win it this year. You know what I mean? He kind of took that team from last place about 5 games into the season and just carried them through to the top 4 and a game away from the grand final. And it was mostly off the back of him. So, just such a freakish season. It was hard to see anyone else but him taking out the major gong this year.
Yeah.
Didn't he also have a good Origin series as well?
Oh, unbelievable. Yeah.
He did, yeah. And I think Cleary may have been a bit closer because they announced him without even counting in the final round points because he had won by a big enough margin. But if Cleary hadn't got injured and missed all those games, then it could have been different. But then Tommy only played 15 games himself. So
it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it was a great year for him, and hopefully it's a sign of him staying healthy for the entire season next year for Manly because they do need him. And Simon went back to the drug comment saying as long as NRL doesn't have a crystal meth problem. Yes.
Well, yeah, that would be worse. Yeah, that would be a lot worse.
That would. It's all bad. It's all bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, that definitely would not be a good look. But yeah, more Dally M news. I see Mark's here. Hey, Mark.
Hello, Mark.
Sam Walker won Rookie of the Year, which was kind of on the cards. I know there was a lot of talk once the news about Walsh came out that he would most likely not get it. But they actually came out afterwards and said that he wasn't in the running because he had 2 suspensions during the year. So as soon as I heard that they were ruling that, that was kind of in the cards that it would be Sam in my eyes. It was always between those two in my head. And yeah, to further prove that the drug scandal wasn't going to stop anyone, Brandon Smith made it into the team of the year. So yeah, and then Craig Bellamy won Coach of the Year. And James Tedesco won Captain of the Year, which I think is no surprise after we've talked about how tough it's been for the Roosters having 30-40 million of their salary cap on the sidelines. It's a tough time, and much like how Roger won it last year due to the tough situation the Warriors were in. So I kind of thought he would get it there. And then continuing the Roosters, Josh Morris won the Proven Summons medal for Moment of the Year after comforting his brother when he left the field with a career-ending injury. And any thoughts on those before we get into the team of the year?
Hard to argue with any of those in my eyes, Brad. I think I would have gone the same way with pretty much all of those. Like you say, once Reece Walsh was out of the running for rookie, it was pretty much going to be Sam Walker. I know last week in the comments, Mark said Josh Schuster would be a good shout as well, but I think Sam Walker, the way he came on as a young 18-year-old and winning a few games for the Roosters, with clutch field goals, I think all of those are pretty good in my eyes.
Yeah, and then they do a team of the year. Tommy Turbo was fullback of the year, as you'd expect after his great performance. The wingers were Ruben Garrick and Brian To'o. Centers were Matt Burton and Justin Olam. 5'8" was Cody Walker. Halfback was Nathan Cleary. Props were James Fisher-Harris and Payne Haas. Hooker was Brandon Smith. Second rowers were Viliami Kikau and Isaiah Papali'i. And then lock of the year was Isaiah Yao. There wasn't really any surprises when I saw the team in my eyes. That's pretty close to what I would pick. I'm trying to look at it now, thinking of a player I would go, maybe. But the only one really would be Kikau, maybe. Yeah, which Mark's just said in the comments. I'm stealing his Isaiah. I don't think Kikau really had the greatest year in comparison to some other second rowers he's mentioned. Kurt Capewell, Koloman Matangi, which I probably bastard the name there, and Schuster.
Really?
I think Kurt Capewell's been one of the better players in the forwards this year.
Yeah, workhorse. Yeah.
So he would have been a slot in there for me. But you got any news on that before we go into reviewing the games? You happy with that team?
Yeah, most of them picked themselves, mate.
Yeah. Cool. So we may as well get straight into these horrible games that I got wrong this weekend. So first game, the game we had different. On Friday night, the Rabbitohs defeated Manly 36-16. Suppose it didn't start well for Manly. They were late to the game, which delayed kickoff because their bus was delayed, unfortunately. And it's going to be a similar talking point in both games, but the losing team appeared to play their worst game or save their worst game for their last game, ideally. Manly just never seemed to really click into gear, and the Rabbitohs just looked dangerous from start to finish. Sitting at home going for Manly because I wanted to try to catch up in our tips. It felt like a Warriors game to me where it didn't matter what the score was. I still had hope that something would happen, and that something just never did. Yeah, they did quite well keeping Tommy Turbo quiet, and the usual suspects in the Rabbitohs did all the damage with Reynolds and Walker. But what did you think about this performance?
I think the Rabbitohs did really well. Watching it, especially, it was quite evident early on that there was something not quite right with Adam Reynolds. It was Cody Walker doing a lot of the in-play kicks, and then they scored a couple tries, and Blake Taff was taking the shots at goal. So, yeah, I thought the Rabbitohs did really well in spite of that because, normally Adam Reynolds is a big part of their kicking game and has a big influence in that regard. But Walker stepped it up and he did a really good job. He's not really known as an organizer, but, again, he was right in the thick of things. He ended up getting first try. I thought Taff, even though he's very inexperienced at this level, was really great. And he laid on a nice try for Alex Johnson as well. And he looks every part of first grader. He's not shirking away, even though he's quite inexperienced. And he's done well filling the boots of Latrell, albeit a very different style. Yeah. And then Manly just made too many mistakes. I mean, they had two tries rubbed out, actually, one through an obstruction and one through Tommy Turbo. I think it was Tommy Turbo losing the ball over the line. So, who knows? If those two tries are actually scored, we could have been talking about a different result because, they were essentially out of the game, but they're able to still put a few points on in pretty quick fashion when they get a bit of ball. They just made too many mistakes and didn't have enough of the ball in the first half, and then 22-0 at halftime, game was gone.
Yeah, like I said, that Manly have that ability to just pile on points when they want to, but they just couldn't in this game. Full credit goes to the Rabbitohs. It was good to see Benji Marshall get to another grand final. Firmly putting the Rabbitohs as my team I'm going for this weekend. As I said, I've been really appreciating Manly, but it feels right having a team like the Rabbitohs to kind of support for me. Just trying to save any face after getting this so wrong. But I thought it was a great game despite the 20-point margin. I think it was still exciting and had some edge of your seat moments, which is what we want to see week in, week out when it comes to NRL football. That sees the Rabbitohs get their ticket to go to the grand final. And Taff, while we're on it, he's going into the grand final as the player with the least amount of experience in the history of going to a grand final, which is great. And it'll be great to see how he goes on that big stage. It's a lot of pressure to put on him, but he's got a great team around him, so I'm sure they'll do their best to look after him. That takes us to the final game. We've got the Panthers defeating the Storm 10-6. Completely shocked me, this game. I went into it quite cocky. Unfortunately, it looks like the Storm were the same. And I basically was telling everyone at home that the Storm were going to have this in the bag by halftime. And it wasn't high scoring by any means. But the Panthers' defense was just too good, and it was the wrong time for the Storm. They were dropping balls left, right, and center. They were looking like a bottom 8 team, if I can be brutally honest. They were looking comical at times. Cameron Munster looked lost out there, and I think it was the first time since Cameron Smith had left that they really looked like they were struggling for a leader out there, and I'm sure it's something that's going to be worked on in the off season. But there's some serious leaders leaving that club. You got Finucane leaving. They're really going to have to work on kind of getting that leadership nucleus back, where when the chips are down and the game is there to be either won or lost, those guys that get everyone together and keep them on target, because that just seemed to be what happened here. They were struggling, and it was over. And Mark said as well, once they lost Christian Welsh and Brandon Smith, they looked done. I think that was a huge difference as well. They had some of their bigger boys play longer minutes, and Brandon Smith and Welsh both add so much to that Storm team. But I feel like I'm just sitting here making 100 excuses for the Storm. The Panthers, they're one of the better defending teams in the competition, and it's that cliche defense wins championships. And it's going to be really intriguing, that grand final. Their solid defense against the Rabbitohs' super attack. It should make for a very interesting night. But Panthers, they didn't look pretty, but they did exactly what they needed to do to get the job done.
Yeah, and the game had a heck of a lot of intensity. So you were kind of alluding to the fact that Melbourne made a lot of mistakes. And I think in that game, high pressure, very defensive. I think some credit has to go to the Panthers for forcing a lot of mistakes and being very intense with whatever they were doing. You summed up the game pretty well, but I just feel kind of vindicated because I know a couple episodes back you put Paul Kent's opinion to me in the questions, and Paul Kent said that they, looked like they were done for the year. And then you put that to me, and I sort of thought, no, I think there's enough quality there that if they get over the Eels, it's just a one-off game away against the Melbourne Storm to make a grand final, and it's turned out that way. And they've got a ton of quality. They've got the New South Wales halves. Well, you don't just stop at the halves. They've got a half dozen New South Wales reps in their team, and just their whole forward pack is filled with ridiculous workhorses, and then a big bullocking kick out on the edge as well. So they've got threats all over the park to beat any team, and I think they did a really good job containing the Storm. And what you and Mark said as well about the cheese and Welch going off, that was a big one. I mean, I think it shows the importance of the cheese to Melbourne as well. I know they obviously have a very good replacement in Harry Grant, but he didn't look as authoritative in my mind as what Brandon Smith does. You know, to me, Brandon Smith's had such a good season, and he has a lot of authority about what he's doing when he runs, when he hits forwards flat at the line. So I think they were really missing that.
Yeah, and Mark and Paul said the same thing, basically. Mark said it's 3 tough games the Panthers have played, and they look battle-hardened now after that.
Yeah.
And he's not sure how Salsa will respond in a tough arm wrestle. And Paul kind of said the same thing, saying that if it's a low-scoring game, it's the Panthers, and if they can get into a point-scoring fest, the Rabbitohs will win. If it is stuck in that arm wrestle, I don't know if the Rabbitohs can hold on. I think that's kind of where the Panthers are in their element. So, yeah, it will be interesting to see if the Panthers can get them to play their tighter game. It will be interesting to see what the Rabbitohs do. But they have a pretty knowledgeable guy on their bench and a pretty knowledgeable guy in their coach's box. So I'm sure they'll be prepared. And Mark's also said he's glad that Tavita Pangai Jr. has been ruled out. He doesn't really deserve a grand final this season as a hired gun for a few games. Yeah, I'm not going to be as harsh as you, Mark. I don't wish injuries on anyone, but I see your point. He's been there for 5 seconds, and he was there to fill in the gap for James Fisher-Harris, who was back now anyway. So
it's a fine line, isn't it? 3 tough games for the Panthers, and they look battle hardened. How many tough games before you before you're worn out and you're knackered? I mean, it's they're skating a thin line there as to are they are they going to run out of steam, or have they just been, as he says, have they just been hardened up? Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. But Simon said it's very hard to pick who's going to win. He's going for the Rabbitohs by 6, and it'd be nice to see Benji win one more championship. I agree with that. I really would like, if this is, Benji has been kind of coy on this, if this is his last year or not. But it would be great if it is his last year. It'd be great to see him go out with a grand final win, especially when at the start of the season, when we started the show this year, Richie, he didn't even have a club yet.
Yeah.
Basically, no one was really sure what was going to happen with him. So it would be a good fairy tale ending.
It would.
But yeah, we'll go into our picks. So I got 0 from 2, and you got 1 from 2. We both got the Storm game wrong, and you were correct with your guess that the Rabbitohs might luck out a win here, which we may as well say you have won the finals tipping comp, because I am on 4 from 8 and you're on 6 from 8. So with 1 game left, I don't think I can peg that back. So
my crystal ball was showing me a bus that was going to be late to a stadium, mate. So I couldn't tip any other way.
Yeah. So well done. I won the one that actually counts and takes a lot of thought.
Yeah, you did. I'll give you that.
You got this little one. So that's our picks. We'll go into questions. Do we have any questions from the audience, Paul?
No, we don't have any. It's we've just been sort of going through. Actually, just one question earlier from Simon. Do you think Benji Marshall should be immortal?
100%.
Very definitive, Brett.
Yeah, 100%. I think.
What's your reasoning?
Are you sure not 200%? I mean, come on, we're a sports show here. We don't. 100% isn't enough. You got to give more than 100%.
204. I just think he's been such a great contributor to the game, and I think the only thing that would probably take that away is when he left and went to that rubbish Blues team.
And it's great to see a Blues player in the in the final. Also,
you can barely call him a Blues player. There was a lot behind that, though. See,
Beautiful.
I'd burn it. I think he's contributed so much to NRL in general. You know, you think of all those highlights, but he's not just a highlight machine. He really became a leader and one of the better halves that they've always had. And Max also said, what about the Rubbish Dragons team he also went to? Okay. We'll forget all that stuff and look at when he's a Tiger and when he was a Rabbitoh, and forget that stuff in the middle.
I think you can also say he played a very big part in the Kiwis winning a World Cup as well, winning their first World Cup. That's pretty big.
I think, if there was ever going to be a New Zealand immortal, he would be the most likely candidate that Australians would pick. I know we've got soft spots for guys like Stacey Jones and that. I think also
massive soft
should
spot.
be in there. A guy like Stacey should be immortal in my eyes as well. But in terms of the Australians allowing a New Zealander into it, Benji is probably the closest we'll get, because they'll say, well, Benji's a Kiwi, but he's our Kiwi because he's been in Australia the whole time, if you get my drift. But what are your thoughts, Richie, since it sounds like you're against it, you Fleabag?
I don't often... No, I'm not against it. I just don't... I don't like going too deep into these should so-and-so be an immortal, because there's so many. I mean, there's Benji, but then where do you start? Like you say, there's Stacey Jones. There's other guys that aren't immortals that probably deserve it as well. And maybe in time they will, your Lockyers and Fittlers. But in terms of a New Zealander, like you say, his resume's pretty much, he's won a grand final. He's won a rugby league World Cup. He's won Tri-Nations. He's done pretty much everything a Kiwi there is for a Kiwi to do. So from that side of things, I could see why there's an argument for it. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for that, Paul. And we've got our questions.
13 immortals of all time in NRL, and you think he's that good?
Well, they're very frugal with who they let into the group.
Which is exactly why I'm on the fence.
I see Mark's talked about Jesse Royal as an immortal. Jesse Royal was an imposter. He wasn't even a footballer. I'm not even going to contemplate that. He is still hands down the worst signing the Warriors have ever made, and I hope he's doing horrible wherever he's gone. It's just
that's harsh, Brad. But I watched a game. I think I was texting Brad about it. It was on Sky Sport, Warriors versus Broncos. I think it was a throwback 2010 game. And Jesse Royal was playing. And within the span of about 3 or 4 minutes, he'd made 3 or 4 knock-ons. And I texted Brad to say he's just like I remember him.
It's horrible. Worst player ever. See, Rob's here. Hey, Rob. So what's your question for me? We'll go with it a bit early.
Okay.
Tory.
Shane Endicott.
No, I'm sticking with Jesse Royal as my worst warrior.
Nice.
I won't be swayed.
Okay. So my question for you is, just with the season coming to a conclusion after this weekend, how have you enjoyed the season, Brad? And what will be your lasting takeaway or your lasting memory of 2021, the NRL season?
This season, it's been really hard. I've enjoyed the season, but I've also really disliked it at the same time. I feel like the second year of the Warriors not having games at Mount Smart really got to me. Obviously, we do this show. I watch all the games. I write about the Warriors. So it's not like I ever put it away, but it's just missing them, missing going to live games and stuff. For the second year in a row really just made it harder to watch. I was kind of getting jealous. They're both here. Mark and Rob are both here, seeing their their bloody pictures on Facebook of them going to games and stuff. It was kind of. Simon said Jesse works in the mining industry, according to Wikipedia. Okay, that's great news for him. Sounds horrible. Got a huge chip on my shoulder. But yeah, that part. So I have enjoyed the season, but the Warriors weren't playing well, and I wasn't getting to watch them live. So it kind of put a dampener on it. And I'm going to steal Rob's answer. My lasting memory for the 2020 season was the massive gap between essentially from round one to a few weeks ago, there was essentially a handful of teams that had a chance of getting to the grand final, and then everyone else. Admittedly, Manly kind of snuck in there because, the first month they were looking embarrassingly bad, but it was essentially the Rabbitohs, the Storm, and the Panthers where like you knew it was probably going to be one of those lot that would be in the grand final. Everyone basically said it was going to be a Storm Panthers final. Got very close. And Paul made a good question. Will Moana Pacifica play at Mount Smart before the Warriors? I think they bloody will.
They will.
I think they will. So, which is a shame. It's not something that the Warriors are doing on purpose, obviously. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm having a go at them. And Mark just said next season with the Warriors based in Australia, would you come over here to watch games live? Yeah,
probably won't be allowed to.
Depending on the situation, I can't even go and see Richie right now. So, I if I can learn how to scale the wall that's blocking New Auckland off from the rest of the country, I will probably go and see my family and stuff first. But if Mark's offering to buy tickets to get me to Australia to watch a Warriors game, I'm all in. Paul hasn't. Paul's checks have kind of been bouncing, so I don't have that. I don't have that New Zealand Sport Radio money yet, but I'm sure it's coming.
So are you testing the open market for different shows to host, Brad?
No, and Mark said to plan for Magic Round. That could be an idea. It's just so hard because of how everything is, and like Simon wants me to stay in Auckland. Doesn't want me spreading the disease everywhere. So it's one of those things that's really hard to plan for. But yeah, ideally it would be good to do. That's kind of what it's looking like at the moment. We at least can get our takeaways now, so we won't all be rushing.
We won't all be rushing on the other side. Yeah.
But I think that's probably my lasting memory. What about you? I've kind of steamrolled that and taken it over.
Well, it was your question, but maybe a couple. Tommy Trebojevich's freakish season, the high tackle crackdown, and all the head scratching sin bins we saw this year. That'll definitely sit long in the memory, and maybe just how piss poor Kane Evans is at landing a punch.
Yeah, no, thank God there's no Fight for Life anymore, because I wouldn't want him to represent rugby league against rugby union in that scenario. But my question for you, Blake Ferguson's time as an NRL player is at an end, and he's claimed that he has a goal to play for the Wallabies. It's a two-pronged question. Do you think he can make the switch, and would any rugby team pick him up? I know Australian rugby's kind of in dire need of help, but yeah, you're more of the union head out of the two of us. I'm sure Paul probably would like to have a 2 cents worth, but what do you reckon?
Brad, what makes you think they're in need of dire help? They've just beaten the world champions 2 times in a row and now beaten Argentina, so they're 3 on the trot. Second place in the rugby championship.
Look,
I digress.
Springboks are rubbish.
Yeah. I think the Wallabies is quite a lofty goal for him, because I think to be selected for the Wallabies, and Paul will probably confirm this, I'm not 100% sure if this is still the way. I'm pretty sure he has to be playing Super Rugby to make the Wallabies, isn't it? Don't they have the Ghetto rule where you can only be overseas based if you're less than 60 caps or something like that? Is that still the case?
You mean over 60 caps? Yes, except they're now having like 3 players that they're allowed to be, and they're slowly making it looser. So who was the player again?
Blake Ferguson. So apparently they're looking at him to go to Japan. So I think if he goes to Japan, he'll find it hard making the Wallabies. Yeah.
Has he ever played rugby union?
He's a winger. Come on, wingers don't do anything in either sport. Let's be fair.
Mark's just made a quality comment there. To play for the Wallabies, you must be
Samoan or Tongan. Yeah.
We've seen various players. I mean, Sam Burgess and Benji Marshall have a go and not give enough time. Whereas if you look at someone like, as much flack as Sonny Bill took, he did 2 years in France before coming back and doing 2 years in Super Rugby. So he did like 4 years before he got there. Blake Ferguson at 31. In 4 years' time, he's 35 now. He's doing it too late. No chance.
Definitely too late. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've seen Lottie Takeri and guys like that do it, and Wendell Saylor, but I don't think he's quite at that level.
But that's also, we're going back now nearly 10 years. And rugby has become so much more professional over that time. At the time, the league players were just so much fitter, and they're just their whole strength and conditioning was so much better than the union guys that they could come over. But now that's kind of unions caught up a lot on that side of things.
Yeah, and I think the Wallabies still have some good wingers out there, and like Vunivalu, is he actually still regular in the Wallabies?
He hasn't been playing, but Korobedi is another one. Korobedi
has, but Vunivalu came over this season, for example, played for the Reds, and he hasn't cracked the Wallabies yet. Where does Ferguson compare to Vunivalu?
I would rather Vunivalu out of the two.
And Vunivalu came from a union background as well.
Yeah, and look, he didn't look totally out of place on at Super Rugby level, but I think Ferguson.
Yeah, I think Fergo will do fine in Japan though. But so he'll make some coin. But I don't see him being a Wallaby in my opinion. But I knew I'd ask the question because I knew I'd get some more educated answers out of you two than myself. So I thought it was a good question to throw in.
Nice.
So before we go on to predicting the grand final, we talked a bit at length about my little hobby of fantasy teams when I was bored watching the games last week. So we had them a lot of comments last week, and I've had a lot of comments tonight from Paul about how rubbish my teams are. So before we go into the grand final, we will bring up our teams. So we had the comic book teams that I did with my household, and then we decided to do wrestling teams for me and Richie. So we may as well do the comic book ones first, since Richie had no part in it.
Do you start DC or Marvel?
You surprised me.
What have we got? Oh,
okay, DC. So full disclosure before we go in, these teams were made by basically voting in my household. So there's some people that I don't agree with, and some people I would have put in that Paul was probably going to yell at me for because they're not here. But so for DC Comics, we had Superman at fullback. Kind of cheating having the Flash and Reverse Flash on the wings because there's no one else really. Centers, we had the Green Lantern and Nightwing. Our halves pairing, we had Green Arrow and Batman because Batman's, where else would he be? And Green Arrow's pretty accurate with his arrows, so I'm sure he's going to be accurate with his kicks. Front row, we've got Bane, the Joker, and Cyborg. Second row, we've got Steppenwolf and Aquaman with Shazam at lock. 14, we've got Jason Todd, who's also known as the Red Hood. Then we've got Darkseid, Solomon Grundy as our forward rotation. And then I've got Wonder Woman as my interchange super sub.
Yeah, I want to applaud you on that selection too, Brad. Very inclusive of you. I'm liking that.
So we ended up going on both sides of this. We ended up going with more commonly known characters in terms of ones that have been in movies and stuff as well, because I've got some deep cuts that people probably wouldn't understand. More on the Marvel side, but yeah, it's
I'm surprised we've not got Arnie Schwarzenegger's Iceman in there somewhere.
yeah, no.
No,
No.
I just don't see the Joker as a forward personally.
Well, he's a hooker in this situation, and he's unpredictable. So I think I like the live wire hooker in there as the option. So yeah, and I wanted to have him in there because I wanted a picture of him, which I knew Richard would deliver in his team list. So that's what we've done.
Oh, sorry, oh, dearie me, Mr. Freeze. I've got that totally
Mr.
wrong.
Freeze.
Sorry, Robert, you are right.
Yeah.
Mr. Freeze, not Iceman.
Yeah.
And then so
And yeah,
as Simon says, Poison Ivy.
There's so many great characters that you could put in. You could do it for days. So it's hard.
Poison Ivy as a hooker, first scrum. You've got the opposition front row totally out of action, haven't you?
I didn't want to do the cliche of having a woman as a hooker, Paul. I wanted to keep it above brow. Yeah, Simon said Black Lightning. See, I knew this would derail quickly. There's so many.
Brad is such a big comic book movie fanatic. I think he would have overthought this list and completely sort of debated into the ground.
Yeah, there's so many, and there's a lot more for Marvel. I literally have a Marvel encyclopedia about this thick that has thousands of characters that I could put in. When we're making these
the Marvel
things,
one is I'm much more looking forward to, because the DC one, I'm not a DC person myself. I'll be honest.
There's so many characters that you could put in. But yeah, go into Marvel. This one, there's a lot more that I argued that I lost on. I'm not going to lie. I lost out. I got outvoted with fullback with Deadpool. I don't personally see him as a fullback, but I got outvoted. Quicksilver on one wing, which makes sense. He's kind of their version of the Flash. The centers, we've got Black Panther and Iron Fist. The other wing, we've got Spider-Man, who was my pick for fullback. Halves, it's kind of identical to DC. We've got Hawkeye, our bow and arrow man at 5'8", and we've got Captain America at halfback. Front row, we've got Incredible Hulk, Wolverine, and Thanos. Second row, we've got Drax and Thor, and we've got Iron Man in his suit at lock. On the bench, we've got Loki as our kind of dummy half replacement, kind of counteracting the Joker. Then we've got Juggernaut, who is our big front forward, Vision, and then Captain Marvel to counteract the Wonder Woman, keeping a woman on both sides. But yeah, there's plenty of thousands, and Paul's had to go at me.
Mark's gone Black Widow, but look, this is very MCU heavy. Let's be honest here. The only sort of characters you've got in here that aren't MCU, Wolverine from the X-Men there. You've also got Juggernaut, who is kind of MCU because he's in the Deadpool movies.
Yeah.
So Iron Fist is perhaps the only other one, but Iron Fist does have a TV show. Whereas and Robert, yes, exactly one of my points, Ant-Man. Because yes, he can make himself big or small, but maybe do you go with Wasp instead, because she can also fly, so she can go big and fly. No, we've not seen her go big yet in the movies. To me, the massive gaping hole in this one. What about Professor X? Professor X is the coach.
He's the coach.
Yeah,
he's the coach.
You can't put him on the
He's your Wayne Bennett.
Yeah, Professor X is completely the coach.
And Daredevil can't see the ball. So I mean,
that's the point.
That's why he's in the bunker. That's why he's in the bunker. Be the best bunker.
But I mean, look, there is nobody here from Marvel's first family, and then that is so I think you've got to put the Human Torch on one of the wings.
Yeah, I had Spider-Man at fullback, and I had the Human Torch on a wing, and I also had the Thing instead of Vision, but I was outvoted. But there's thousands. I also had Puck, who probably no one knows. on my interchange as my replacement hooker, because Puck is essentially he's a little man, perfect for the hooker role. Very similar to not Magneto, very similar to Wolverine in stature, but without the claws. But yeah, there's thousands. I could go deep into this.
You just give her the ball, she goes invisible. They can't see her, and she just walks through. I mean, come on.
But you can see the ball, so you know.
Sue Richards should be in there somewhere. But
in all fairness, you could literally do a 17 for the ladies. You could do a women's team for both sides. There's that many. And yeah, the Punisher as well. Punisher's too much of a thug, and I can't have too many thugs on my team.
That suits you to a team.
The Punisher's only human, right? You just go with guns, and I'm not sure we're not allowing guns on there, are we?
Yeah, but it's
Mr. Fantastic could just reach out and score
from his own trial.
Go big and take one step, and he's there. So there we go. Point. Anyway,
there's thousands though. There's thousands. But yeah, there were interesting ideas with not too much thought put into them. So stop hating on me, okay? It's hurting my feelings. The next bit though we had was the wrestling ones that you guys threw at us, which we've done one each, and Paul wasn't happy with either of those either. So you may as well bring them up, Paul, since you were very opinionated on how bad we were with our picks. So the one on the left is me, one on the right is Richie. So my team, I've got Shawn Michaels at fullback. I've got X-Pac and Jeff Hardy on the wings, Randy Orton and Edge in my centers. I've got Chris Jericho and Triple H in my halves.
So that's interesting. What have you got Triple H at halfback? He's enormous.
Yeah, but Triple H, he's the biggest mastermind in the game. You know,
fair enough.
He is the game. That's his nickname and all. And Chris Jericho is, one of the best. So he had to be in the halves there. My front row, I've got Big Show, CM Punk, and Brock Lesnar. My second row, I've got Roman Reigns and John Cena. And then my lock, I've got The Rock, because that just makes sense. You got to have The Rock at lock. And then my bench, I've got Rey Mysterio for my little man. I've got Goldberg, Bobby Lashley, and The Fiend, Bray Wyatt on my bench. And then Richie, you go through your team. I'm talking too much here.
Very big team, very formidable pack you've got, Brad. I had Sean. I must admit I had to change a couple of my picks because Brad and my list was starting to look pretty similar. But I had Shawn Michaels as well as the fullback. I've gone for a bit of Polynesian flair on the wings with the twins, Jey Uso and Jimmy Uso. So it's a bit of a Morris brothers deal there. In the centers, I had Roman Reigns and Edge, so two guys who have the spear as their finishing move, so they're going to be good defensively, obviously. CM Punk and Rey Mysterio is my half, so CM Punk's the communicator. He's got the yap going. Bam Bam Bigelow and Brock Lesnar is my props. A lot of intimidation there, and also a bit of athleticism. AJ Styles is the hooker. The Rock and Goldberg in the second row, and of course, from a Warriors fan, the ultimate warrior at lock had to do it. And then the bench, Eddie Guerrero, Randy Orton, John Cena, and Triple H. It's just a few legends on the bench there.
And Mark's made a comment that Paul actually made earlier on as well, saying Kane and Undertaker front row surely. There's so many guys. It's like the Marvel thing again. I struggled. I had to make some rejigs.
There's some big obvious name. You've gone for Big Show, which I guess is a bit like my Andre the Giant comment.
Yeah, Big Show's quicker than Andre.
So I'm willing to back down on that one. But I mean, how you cannot have Hulk Hogan, the legend Hulk Hogan, in there somewhere? And look, he is the man. So to me,
I had I had too many Polynesians in my team, and you might not be up to the current affairs news, but Hulk Hogan's not really a fan of them, so I couldn't really have them in there. It would create a bit of a divide.
Oh, is he? Okay, yes. I'll agree. I didn't realize he was racist. But there we go. Sorry.
No, but I would have had him at lock. But there was just so many. And I know Simon took a stab at The Rock being a failed American footballer, but Goldberg's kind of in that as well. And Simon actually mentioned about ex-NRL players.
Could have had Vito in there.
Yeah, Daniel Vito, who played for the Raiders. He's actually currently with the WWE right now, and seems to be doing quite well in the, what do you call it, like second division, I guess you'd say, if you want to put it into sporting terms, in their feeder club. So he was almost attempting to put in there just due to the fact that he played NRL. And yeah, Mark's also said Hogan's not a team player. So yeah, but it's all fictitious.
I don't see how you can have. I like the way that the Richie went with his twins on the wing. I just don't see how can you go for Jeff Hardy and not have both of them? I mean, how can you just have one of the? You can't have a tag team and have just one player.
Matt's not really good at running, so I didn't want him out on the wing, and I didn't want to be cliche because that was my thought, to put them both out there.
You've got to have you've got to go for combinations in team sports. You see, so the combinations what you need.
That's why I had Randy Orton and Edge in the centers together, because they were tag team champs at one point. At the start, I had Shawn Michaels and Triple H in the halves to have that combination too. And then I had to move people around because I was missing people and I needed my favorites in the team. So that's why we've got CM Punk, John Cena and Goldberg in there. And Bray Wyatt, which I don't even have my Bray Wyatt picture up anymore. I had a Bray Wyatt artist sketch that someone had made.
All I would say, folks, is that if you ever have Brad as your coach of your team, look out to be playing favourites. He doesn't pick best players.
100%. Same with my Warriors team. So, and yeah, those twins on the wing were too slower than Mamalo. Try the corner, for Jeff. See, my team would win hands down, even though we've got players in the same positions. And I feel sorry for Rey Mysterio trying to kick on the last with Brock Lesnar running his way.
I think Bam Bigelow and Brock Lesnar are picking up. Well, you got Lesnar as well, so I think Big Show's too slow, mate. I think my pack would go right through the middle of yours.
That's true. But the fact that I don't think many of these guys could even play 10 minutes.
No,
they had to. So,
there might be a few players also failing on the steroid test.
I was just going to say they wouldn't get through WADA.
Exactly. But yeah, it was a bit of fun since we don't have as many games to talk about. So yeah, thanks.
And of course, we might sort of end up having a show that's less than 3 hours long.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I thought it was a bit of fun and gave us something to do in the weekend when there weren't as many games to watch. But that takes us into the grand final, Richie. This Sunday, the Panthers and the Rabbits. I've gone with the Panthers. No, I don't. I've gone with the Rabbits. I'm looking at our picks here. I've gone with Rabbits. They're the team I want to win. As I said last week, I've kind of been growing a bit of a distaste for Penrith. So they've kind of become my team to hate this year. It will no doubt change to another team next year, as is my habit. But I'm going for the fairy tale. I'm going for the Rabbits. I want to see Benji get another grand final. And I think they play a nice attacking style. As long as they can hold on to the ball, that's been my criticism all year. If they don't get a case of the dropsies, they're a very hard team to beat. If it looks like they're going to start dropping the ball, they're in for a long night against the Panthers' defense.
This is a heart and head call for me. So my heart wants the Rabbitohs to win and send Benji off the way he should, the way he deserves. My head's telling me the Panthers. They've played 3 times, I think, already this year, and it's 2-1 in Panthers' favour. I think it'll be a very close game. I think we'll probably get something similar to when these teams squared off in the first round of the finals, where it was a very close game and could have gone either way. Very defensive, very intense. I just think maybe the Panthers, having lost one last year, will go one better this year, and the New South Wales halves will turn up and turn the screws and make the big plays to get them over the line. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm picking Panthers.
And I'll put a bit of a TAB story in there, as some people may know. I like to take a punt. I had money on the Rabbitohs early on, so it's been sitting there for a couple of months, and I was regretting it. And then now it's not looking too bad. I had money on the Panthers from round 1, and when I saw that they were playing the Storm in that elimination, I cashed out and don't have money on them anymore. And I'm regretting it because I probably would have made a little bit more money if they do win. So yeah, that's it. I shot my shot too early, but I'm hoping that the Rabbitohs haven't shot their shot too early and can go one further. So yeah, doesn't matter in terms of our tipping comp because you're always going to get the win here. But hopefully I get this right and the Rabbitohs win and I make it a 1-point victory for you instead of a 3-point victory.
I hope so too.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be a great game and really looking forward into breaking it down next week on the show. But before we go, we've got Super League news because they still exist as well. Wakefield Trinity have announced Willie Poaching as the head coach. And the Lee Centurions, as we've discussed with our Super League correspondent, Simon, they've been confirmed to be relegated. This has actually led to a few players jumping ship already. The first 2 I had was James Bell, a former Warrior. He is signed with St. Helens. And Ryan Briley, I think is how you pronounce his name, has made the move to Salford. And I'm sure we'll see a lot more players in the upcoming weeks leaving Lee, which is generally what happens when a team gets relegated. The players kind of jump ship and stay in the Super League. So I'm sure there'll be more news on that. But they also had their elimination round. Interesting week with both losing teams failing to score a point. Leeds defeated my Wigan 8-0. And what was I didn't get to watch the whole game. I only got to watch highlights, which is kind of in quotes because there wasn't a lot of highlights. It was a very drab game. But Leeds got the job done. And then Hull KR defeated Warrington 19-0 to see them go through, which means that this week in the semi-finals, we've got Catalans versus Hull KR and St. Helens versus Leeds. We don't really do a lot of predictions here, Richie, but I kind of think teams 1 and 2 are going to go through to the final, which is Catalans and St. Helens. If we're on here next week and it's different, I'll be surprised.
Yeah, I think we kind of called that last week too when we were talking about it. That was our opinion. I'm kind of pulling for Leeds a bit. You know, I'm like you. I support Wigan primarily, but I don't mind the Leeds. I mean, a few of my favourite players have gone there and done well. Ali Lauatiti, Brent Webb.
They still got
Connie Harrell. Yeah, so from here on in, I think I'm pulling for Leeds.
Yeah, I think Catalans are the strongest team right now, as they've shown, and they've got talent all over the park. So it's I feel it's their competition to lose. But I was saying that about the Storm last week. Yeah. So you just never know when it comes down to those one-off games. So we'll keep you up to date with what happens in those games next week. But anything else you want to add before we sign off, Richie?
No, just thanks to you guys, Mark, Simon, Rob, all you guys who tuned in, and Paul for handling all our fantasy pictures and making this all happen. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks, guys, and thanks, Paul, and thank everyone else for watching tonight and joining us. We'll be here next week at 8 p.m. To cover our review of the Grand Final and preview the Super League Grand Final. So remember to tune in 8 p.m. next week on Facebook at your convenience on iHeartRadio if you can't watch live. Just remember to search for New Zealand Sport Radio. And thanks for joining me, Richie, and good night, everyone.
Thank you. Cheers, guys.